Hi and welcome to the Data 7 Embroidery channel. In this video I'm going to take you through some general features of the Data 7 EDS monogramming system, a few options, what they do, and show you at each stage what the results of those particular features will produce. Okay, to open the Data 7 EDS monogramming system, we simply click on this icon as highlighted here, or we can use the menu options and click on monogramming here. What we're seeing is quite a few options and previews of those options. And some of the items I'll show you as we create the monogramming and zoom in to the design, such as underlay styles, column fills, etc. So in this first example, I'm going to show you just some straightforward line monogramming. You can see the line style here set to line. And I've just got the words and letters in there, Data 7. So I've just simply typed my text in, and I can click the Create Monogramming button, and as you can see, it creates me exactly what I typed in. So I can do this as many times as I want. I can go back into the monogramming system, change it, and add some more letters, create it again, back in again, and the height of the size of the monogramming is dictated by these monogramming values. So height and width, 2. So what does 2 mean? Okay, so if we go into Tools and System Options, our system measurement is currently set to centimeters. We can have it in inches. I've chosen centimeters so far in this example. Okay, so I'm going to go back into the monogramming and take off consultancy there, or indeed if I wanted to have it on 2 lines, I can simply just press the enter key there, spread it over 2 lines with no spaces, create the monogramming, and indeed you can see that it's on 2 lines. Okay, so back into the monogramming, I'm going to take away consultancy for the moment, and I'm going to change the size to 1 centimeter. As you remember, our measurement is in centimeters. Create the monogramming again, and indeed you can see that Data 7 is there. Oh, I can see that I've left a carriage return in there, so it's giving me an extra space. So I can go back in, delete that carriage return, and indeed now I've got Data 7 just on the 1 line. Okay, so the next option I'm going to detail with is the column density. So column density is very important. And it means for every column stitch, it's the distance between those column stitches. So what 4.2 means is 4.2 points, or each point is 0.1 of a millimeter. So that actually means 0.42 millimeters distance. So I'll demonstrate that to put my height and width back to 2 centimeters. Create the monogramming. So there's Data 7. I'm now going to make it fit the window, and now I'm going to use the zoom facility and zoom into, let's say, the top end of number 7. So the 4.2 or 0.42 millimeter distance is between this stitch here and this stitch here, and so on, and this stitch and this stitch. So in between, that's 4.2 points, or 0.42 of a millimeter. So if we wanted to change the density to make it less dense, we would increase the spacing. the column density will increase the spacing. Very important to increase the spacing. So we'll create the monogramming again, and you can see the stitches are more sparse. There's a bigger gap between them, the column stitches. So if I zoom in, so you can see the stitches, the gap is wider. In this case, 10 points or 1 millimeter. And likewise, I can go back in and change that and reduce that density to 3 points or 0.3 of a millimeter. So I create the monogramming, and you can now see from that example that the stitches are more dense. If I fit the screen, you can see there are more dense stitches there. Let me zoom in to the top of the number 7. So they are effectively 0.3 millimeters gap between each of these column stitches. So the default we'll be working with today is 4.2. So I've reset that. I've reset the column density back to 4.2. That's a general standard that I would recommend we use on most embroideries or monogramming. There are some exceptions, but in this example I'll use 4.2. Okay, so the next option I'll talk about briefly is the excuse me, the stitch length. So the stitch length, again in embroidery points, is 40, meaning 4 millimeters. So it's basically running stitches are going to be 4 millimeters apart. So in this example, I'll just use the an O as an example. I'll draw it. You won't be able to see it while it's in condensed. I'll talk more about the difference between condensed and expanded in a specific video. I'm going to fit the screen here. So we're talking about really these running stitches here. There aren't any other running stitches. We've got no underlay in there, which I'll come to shortly. So if I was to save this as expanded, I'll just call it number 1 for now, or I'll call it test. I'll then redraw. I'll just show the stitch points on. Okay, they're already on. If I now zoom in to particular parts of the design, in fact I'll just change the colour so it highlights it a bit better. So you can see these black dots are actually the stitch points where the needle penetrates the material, and the distance between these running stitches as they were condensed stitches. If a condensed stitch was that the points were 200 millimeters apart, it would drop a stitch into the material every 4 millimeters or 40 points. Okay, so I'm going to go back into monogramming and put in some test text again, and now we can talk about the design angle. As it says, by default, the design angle, let me change the colour again just to show you what it looks like. We're on a line with no design angle. You'll notice the crosses. These are the condensed stitch points as opposed to a dot, which is an expanded stitch point. Again, I'll go into that in later in a specific video. So what I'm going to do is, so that's what it looks like with no design angle. What I'm going to do now is put a 15-degree design angle, and you can see the design is showing at 15 degrees. You can use block editing to change the design angle even further if you wish. Again, there'll be another video on block editing and point editing later. So I'm going to put the design angle back to 0, and indeed you can see the design angle is now 0. Line spacing. So this is the distance between each line, as it suggests. So at the moment I have the height of my lettering, my monogramming as 2 centimeters, but the distance from the top of one line to the top of the next line is 1.02 centimeters. So you would imagine there's going to be some overlap there, and indeed there is. So from the top of the D to the top of the C, it's only 1 centimetre, or just over 1 centimetre. So that distance isn't big enough. So we can go back in, and generally if you wanted it to be snug, we could make it 2, equal in the height. So that will be straight underneath, directly underneath, or you'd actually want it to be something like 2.25 or 2.2 to give you a 0.25 gap between each of the lines, as you can see there. And indeed, if we just put some more text here, it can have as many lines as you wish. You'll probably have noticed that the monogramming attempts to center the design based on all of your monogramming requirements, so it centers it vertically and horizontally. If you wanted to center it again later, if you've made some changes, then you can just click the center design button here. Okay, moving on to the next option. So we've got column width. Now what column width means is all the monogramming has a default width built into that, a default column width built into that alphabet. And what column width allows us to do is increase that column width, kind of like the bold function in a Word document, a Microsoft Word document or something like that. So we can increase it. So I'm going to go back to our default text, Data 7 Consultancy. Make sure there's no carriage return line feeds or additional lines there. And so this I'm going to run this on a without any increased column width just now. So that's what it looks like. If I want to increase the column width by, let's say, 25% and run it again, you'll notice that the columns are getting a bit chunkier, a bit thicker and wider. We have to be careful how wide we go before it starts to distort how it converts those condensed stitch points actually into stitches. So just an example, if we go 50%, that looks okay, I suppose, but if we went, let's say, 75%, it starts to become a little bit distorted over here. Okay, so that's your column width. So now we have slant angle. So going back to the standard of 0 column width increase, we're now going to put a 15-degree slant angle on the letters. So it will the letters will lean forward by 15 degrees. Okay. That's what it looks like with 15 degrees. Again, we have to be careful not to go too far. So I can say 25. And now you can see there's a bit of distortion here because it's moving the condensed stitch points too far and it's calculating curves in the wrong direction. So certain alphabets you'll be able to use a higher slant angle than other alphabets. Okay, in the same way we can go forward, we can actually lean back by putting a minus slant angle in. So I'm going to lean them back, slant them back minus 15 degrees, and that's what it looks like. Okay, so we'll set that to 0. I'll come back to fill stitch length, but basically using this option here, column fill on, it turns column stitches into fill stitches or seeding stitches. I'll come back to that at the end where I can show how the stitch points, where the needle penetrates the material, and we can increase or decrease how dense the seeding stitch is. So that's covered all the standard what I would call a class of standard monogramming values. Now we're going to go into a few other options here. I'm going to start by line style, simple one. At the moment we've been using a line style as just a line. We can use a circle, which will, as it says, monogram in a particular circle. And the difference between circle and arc is basically your starting point. So the circle will move out a complete radius. And if I create monogramming now, you can see that the radius is set to 15 centimeters here, or 5.19 inches. So you can see this line, this circle around the outside of the window. That's too big for us at the moment, so I'm using the up and the down arrow keys to reduce. So I'm pressing the down arrow key now to reduce that monogramming circle. You could use this to create your monogramming to go around a particular design if you wanted. So I'm going to go with, let's say, I'm going to make it quite small so for visually we can see what it looks like, and press enter. So you can see the monogramming is shown, has been created in that particular circle. Quite simple. And the same with an arc. This will instead of moving out from the center of the window out a radius, the actual design sews through the center, and based on a radius further down. I'll show you how that works here. So this is the center, and you can see that we're just choosing an arc to sew through the center of the design. So whereas in the previous design that's still showing, this is the center of the design here, which moves out the radius and sews around it. If I press enter to accept that arc of 12 centimeters, as we can see here, it's actually creating the center of the monogramming as the center of the design, moving out and sewing in that arc. Okay, so the arc is on the top and arcing down. What if we wanted to arc it from the bottom? So the arc start point would make the bottom, and you can see straight away what it's going to look like. It's going to arc upwards. Press enter. Okay, so now we can see that the arc is going upwards in case you wanted, for example, you wanted this create monogramming underneath a design. Okay, so that's covered the line style, and when an arc is used, the arc start point. What we can look at now is the underlay options. So an underlay is the amount of stitches it places down underneath the monogramming to hold the material in place generally before you actually sew the monogramming. So we would sew just a normal column. Sometimes on certain material the design may move out, may distort. So laying down some underlay stitches first makes the material more stable, and then it sews the monogramming on top. So the first option I'm going to use is the center walk, and as it suggests, it's going to lay down some running stitches up and through each letter, and then sew the letter on top. So I'm just going to use an O, an uppercase O, to try and demonstrate this. Okay, let's create that monogramming. So here we see an uppercase O. So if I'm going to fit the screen now, you can see it's now got a circle of running stitches through the center of the columns. If I show you what it looked like again with the underlay style off and fit, you'll see that there are no running stitches underneath that design. So I'm going to go back in and I'm going to turn them on again. fit the screen. As you can see, that underlay is back again. Okay, so the next option in underlay is narrow column. As it suggests, what it's going to do in the form of an underlay is put a narrow column under each letter. So what I'm going to do is again turn it off just to show you the difference. So if I draw the letter O with no underlay at all, you'll see it's absolutely blank underneath. It's got these tie-off stitches, initial running stitches, and then just columns all the way round. So if I go back into the monogramming system and turn on narrow column and create the letter again, fit the design, you'll notice now that there are some a small column underneath that particular O. So we'll go into it and we can see that the underlay is got a width of 75%, that is. So what that means is that the actual column, the narrow column underlay, is 75% the width of the actual column. So if we just have another quick look there, so yeah, that looks about 75%. So if we then make that 25% and run it again and fit the screen, you can see now it's only 25%. The general standard is probably between 70 and 75%. So I'm going to go in and set that back to 75%. Draw it again and make it fit the screen. What I'll also do now very quickly is just to change the colour of the underlay using point editing here, just to emphasise the fact that there is a column fill under there. So I'm just going to go into point edit. So we know that it's going to initially put a column stitch in there as an underlay, and if we just notice the stitch types as I'm thumbing through this design with point edit, you'll notice firstly there's a needle up, moving out, needle down, it's laying down some running stitches, some tie-off stitches. Now you notice there that it's actually put a column, it's entered a column width. Again, I'll cover point editing and digitizing in more detail in later videos, but there's a wealth of features and functions where you can increase and decrease in the condensed format, Data 7 condensed format, or quick condensed format, where you can manipulate designs at certain points by increasing, decreasing stitch density, column widths, stitch lengths, and indeed here all it's doing is it's laying down a column, or it's about to lay down a column, which is the underlay column, and to achieve the 75% of a normal monogramming letter that we've chosen, it's actually entering a column width, or adjusting the column width by minus 25%. That's how it achieves it. So it digitizes a normal column, but decreases the width by 25%. Again, I'll cover it more in digitizing and point editing in later videos. But for this, in this example, it's just showing you a little insight into how it achieves and how powerful the quick condensed format is, how it achieves the reduction in column width. So there's a minus 25% column width there. It's setting the column density to 20%, and I'll correct myself for what I said a little bit earlier in terms of a running stitch underlay where it was 20 points stitch length. It's actually column density of 20, whereas a normal column is 4.2, which is 0.42 of a millimeter. This is 20 or 2 millimeters gap between these stitches here, which is the two column stitches in the underlay. So what I'm going to do is thumb my way through the design. So there's a running stitch to get to the first column. So now what it's doing is, you see the stitch points that it's laying down in order to calculate the underlay column. But remember, it's going to the outsides of the letters of the column of the letters, you see, but it will actually only be 75% the width, the first column, which is using for underlay, because if you remember, we've put in a minus 25% adjustment. So that's pretty much the end of the column underlay, and that now you'll see that it's reduced the minus to 0, so it's now going to say the next columns that are used in this design are full width, 100% of the width, and it's now setting the column density to 4.2, back to 4.2 as opposed to 20, because the underlay column density doesn't need to be as dense as the actual monogramming. So there we've got a run stitch and then back into a column stitch. So here I'm just going to insert a colour change. So I'm going to insert a colour change here. So you can see here we've got now a needle change, then back to the column stitch. In fact, sorry, I put that probably in the wrong place, but I'm going to press enter and see there's a colour change. Okay, good. So I'm going to refresh that. Now we've got two colours in the design. So the purple is the underlay, so you can see a little bit better that column underlay, and we have the actual monogramming in a different colour, yellow, and you can see on top. So you can see the density difference firstly, and also you can see the column width difference. So just to take that a step further, even though this is not a point editing video, I'm just going to go into the design, and I'm going to find the column density here, just to show you a little tip on point editing, which we can do more automatic in the monogramming, but if you've digitized a design, you'll be able to do this in the same way. I've located the column density, which is 20, which is the purple stitches, and I'm just going to use this icon here to change the value of that 20 again, which is the distance, it's the gap between the column stitches for the underlay. I'm going to reduce that gap to 4 just to show you what it looks like. So now that column density is no longer a distance of 2 centimeters, it's only a distance of 2 millimeters. It's now a distance of 0.4 millimeters. So if I was to just press the enter key to accept those changes and redraw, you'll see now the column underlay stitch is much denser. There's more stitches. So that was just a quick insight in how to change those values and how powerful the quick condensed is when we're dealing with condensed designs. So I'm going to go back in and find the design. Incidentally, how I'm doing that is I'm right clicking the mouse button, or clicking the right mouse button should I say, going into point edit and pressing the home key to go to the start of the design. I'm pressing the page down key to thumb through the design, through each condensed stitch, all the way through until I get to, so there's a column width and there's a column density function. Changing the value, I'm going to make that back to 20, click OK. I'm going to press the enter key to redraw. You can see that the column density for the underlay is back to how it was. And incidentally, I'll just take it one stage further. Home key again to the beginning of the design. Page down to go through the design. This time I'm going to find the column width, which is minus 25%. I can change that value if I wish to be minus 50%. So now it's going to be only 50% width of the column stitch it's sewing, and indeed you can see it is. And if I really wanted to, I can go to the extreme again, home and page down to find the column width function value, and I'm going to make it wider. I'm going to make it 25% wider than the actual monogramming column stitch. So you can see it's now poking out. So you can produce some weird results with that. Okay, so just in correcting myself earlier, I'm going to go back into the monogramming system. Because I've edited this design, it's now a design in its own right, and it's asking me if I want to save it. Well, I'm going to say no. Going back to the narrow column, underlay density, where I said that was the stitch length, it's not, it's the underlay density for the column, the narrow column. The centre wall uses the stitch length for its running stitches. Narrow column is dictated by 75% of the monogramming column width, with a column density of 20. So if we produce that again, we just get the normal design there. If I press the F5 button to refresh, and that's showing us the design as it should be. Okay, a final few options. The next option is banner type. This is just a way of increasing step by step each letter for monogramming to be a banner. And there's several options for banner, which dictates how it expands. If it expands from the first letter to the last letter, or it increases to the center letter, and so on and so forth. So I can demonstrate that. So for this purpose, I'm just going to use the number ones, a few number ones in here. So without the banner, very quickly, that's what it looks like. Back in, I'm going to say I want the banner type to be from the bottom, and the X and Y size of the letter is going to increase by 0.05 of a centimeter. So each letter increases by 0.5, as you can see there, from the bottom. So the bottom remains static and the top increases. Back in, middle. So it's centered through the middle of the design, but the top of the design increases and the bottom of the design increases. Top, as suggests, the top will remain static and the bottom of the design increases. So we now have a middle pan. As you can see from the start, it increases to the middle. So the middle pan means it's panning to the middle of the design and then back again, and the middle indicates that that is the static part of the design. So it increases both on the top and on the bottom of the design, and then decreases to the end. And as you can probably imagine now, what the top does, it keeps the top static, so it increases to the bottom, and the bottom pan function will keep the bottom static and increases through to the top. So if we wanted to make it a little bit more bigger steps for incrementing the panning function, I've changed it now from 0.0 of a centimeter to 0.1 of a centimeter, and each, you can see how that's affected that design. The steps are much bigger. If I wanted to make those separate to each other, I can, and you'll get various results there too. Okay, the panning, the banner option is not really designed for multi-line. As you can see here, the preview doesn't look particularly good. So that's the banner feature described. So two other features I want to draw your attention to. As I said, I'd come to these last, which is the fill stitch length. So firstly, column fill. So as it suggests, if I have a couple O's there as an example and fit the screen, because it's condensed format, you won't be able to see this easily. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to change the colour to a nice lighter colour, refresh, so I can see the condensed stitch points. So these condensed stitch points are not where the material is going to penetrate the the needle is going to penetrate the material. These are condensed stitch points, how it uses the mathematical calculations to create those curves and how many stitches that will end up in your your expanded design. So I've changed the colour to demonstrate the column fill on. So now if I turn column fill on and create the monogramming and fit, you'll see no difference because it's still in condensed format. So what I'm going to do now is just turn that off, create the monogramming, save it as expanded, save it over our test design. Yes, fit. So now you can see these black points. If I zoom in over here, you can see these black points are the stitch points that's going to penetrate the material, and indeed you can see our just make out our underlay column there, which we've left on, which I'll turn off in a second. So if we now go to the next stage, I'll turn off the underlay now and turn column fill on, create the monogramming, normal condensed design so far, save expanded as this time, save, yes, fit. So now you can see there are it's a column fill. You can see the pattern that it's actually producing too. Later in another video I'll discuss pattern fills, pattern design fills, which enables you to either use the built-in pattern fill designs or indeed create your own. You can insert them into any condensed design and change them at any point in your condensed design, making it very easy and very powerful, making it a very powerful digitizing tool. Okay, so you can see that those it's going to drop a stitch in the middle of each of the column stitches because it's now a fill. And the fill stitch length is dictated to by here. In terms of the fill stitch length is 1 millimeter. So I mean that's 10 millimeters. In this case, the fill stitch length is in millimeters, not in points. So it's going to actually drop a stitch every 10 millimeters. So the design, if it can of course, the design width is actually 2 centimeters or 20 millimeters, and it's dropping a stitch every 10 millimeters. So if I was to change that to 5 millimeters, create the design, quickly save it as expanded over our test design. Yep. Fit. You can see now the column fill density has increased every 5 millimeters. Okay, so that covers the column fill, which I'm now going to turn off and put the fill stitch density back to stitch length back to 10 millimeters. The next thing I want to demonstrate is the short stitches. So short stitches are to prevent the clubbing of too many stitches in one place, specifically around curves. So if I'm using the standard block alphabet, which doesn't really suffer from needing short stitches, but I'll show you what it actually does. So I'm just going to change the design color again just to show it more effectively. So I'm going to zoom into this part here. So this is the inner curve. So if the density becomes too high, it'll drop a short stitch in. So rather than have a stitch drop right into the center, it'll drop it short. So around this area here won't become too dense, therefore breaking your underlay thread, your bobbin thread, and causing damage to the material. So on a normal block alphabet, that's not necessarily, it doesn't really suffer from that particular problem. But if we have certain alphabets, or indeed your own digitizing, because when you create your own designs via digitizing, again I'll cover that in a later video, some of the curves you create may require short stitches, and it's automatic. You can actually switch it off, of course, but we recommend keeping it on. But just to demonstrate, if I use I think we have a brush script here using the letter O. It's created a normal letter O in brush script. We will fit the design to the window. We'll now zoom into this area here, and as you can see, because the density in this particular more tighter curve would cause the density to reduce too much, therefore could cause the clubbing of stitches. It's actually dropped in some short stitches, which means it's not going to come all the way across to the inside of the column. It drops in various lengths of short stitches, two different types of lengths, about 0.5 millimeter or 0.8 of a millimeter distance from the center to prevent that clubbing. If I zoom in a little bit further, so you can see that where this stitch would normally come across to here, the density would be too high, therefore it drops a short stitch in. If we go back to the normal size of the design, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. Okay, two final points in using surrounding the text. A couple of options are plus and minus spaces and colour changes. So for this I'm just going to go back to the standard text of, my standard text of Data 7. So using, I'm just going to use block, create the monogramming. There we are, we've got a standard block monogramming Data 7. I'm going to go back in. What I can do is, if I put a chevron, or I'll put a few chevrons, that will increase the space between D and the A. Okay, and indeed if I wanted to make this space narrower between the T and the A, I put in a few chevrons. You can see I've emphasized it, I've overemphasized it there, so the A is over the T. And indeed, if I wanted to put a color change in, I use the shift and the number 6. So obviously the chevrons is the shift and the semicolon, or the shift and the full stop. The color change is the shift and the number 6, the little hat. I can create monogramming there, and you can see there are color changes. So I can, if I take those spaces out, and if I wanted every color, every letter to have a different color, I simply insert a hat in between those particular those letters, and there we have each letter being a different color. And one final note is, obviously you've got roughly 15-16 alphabets here, and we've actually got a two color full block. In this case you wouldn't want color changes in this particular. You could leave them in if you wanted, but it would serve no purpose. But you can there would be a color change, two color changes in between those alphabets, and there we have that particular alphabet being shown. Have a play with all of the other alphabets. That particular alphabet is all uppercase, there are no lowercase letters, so I'd have to put uppercase in. Have a play, and there's no numbers in, of course. Have a play. If you have any questions, please fire your questions over to support at Data 7 Consultancy, and we'll do our best to answer them as quickly as possible. One final note is you are able to create your own monogram, or your own alphabets, using the monogramming alphabet maintenance, or even change letters within any existing alphabet if you wish. Again, this will be covered in a specific video about creating and maintaining your own alphabets. Okay, so what we've discussed in this video is the default values for monogramming, heights, densities, stitch lengths, etc. Line spacing. We've also discussed monogramming using lines, circles and arcs. We've discussed how we can add two different types of underlay, and we've also discussed using the banner facility.